Hello and welcome to Literati, the show that explores writers, publishers, anyone who's involved in the process of bringing you these wonderful pieces of literature. The show is on News Central and it's brought to you by Glow. I'm excited, so excited today to have with me Mona Eltahawy, the writer, Egyptian-American journalist, and social commentator. She has written extensively on women's issues and Muslim political and social affairs. Her works have been featured in the Washington Post, New York Times, and Christian Science Monitor, all over the place. She started the Muslim women's Me Too movement. That's credited to you, so you are the founder of that officially. And that in no way diminishes the work of every other woman who's supported this movement, but we must give recognition where it's due. Mona, thank you so much for being here. Huge fan of your work.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, this book, The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. Where do I start? Now, reading this book, one thing that comes across is that you're angry.
Mm-hmm.
And you make no excuses for this. And it's a running theme throughout this book. Tell me about that.
I'm angry, but I'm more than just angry.
Oh, good.
Because anger is one of the 7 sins in the title.
Yes.
So I structure the book across the 7 what I call necessary sins. Obviously, I take it from deadly sins. And anger is just the first sin. I say that anger is just the beginning. Anger is a fuel for the engine of the feminist revolution, but it's not enough. So while I'm an angry woman and I'm a proudly angry woman, there are many other aspects to my revolution. So the 7 sins are, as you know, because you've read the book, anger, attention, ambition, profanity, power, violence, and lust. So anger is just one of them. And I think it's really important to place anger as just one of them, because one of the stereotypes of feminists, and I fully accept the stereotype, I'm not ashamed of this at all, is that we're angry women. Of course we're angry women. How can we not be angry? How can you be a conscious human being living under the crimes of patriarchy and not be angry? So I'm furious. But there is much more to my feminist revolution than just anger. And I explain in the book what the other fuels of my feminist revolution are.
And so essentially what you're giving to women and girls in this book are the necessary tools to navigate this terribly patriarchal system.
Yes.
And like you rightly say, people often describe feminism as just a whole bunch of angry women. You're giving women and girls 6 additional tools to that anger to do something about and move to a revolution. So tell us about that revolution.
Well, each one of those sins are things and attributes and ways of being that women and girls are not supposed to want to do or to be. So, you know, we're not supposed to seek attention. And I ask why. My ideas are really important. I say that I'm one of the most important feminists alive today. So my ideas are worthy of attention. And see, when I say that, just by saying that, it makes you smile because it makes me sound arrogant and attention-seeking. And I'm telling women and girls, we should be arrogant and attention-seeking, because for too long we've been told to be quiet, to be modest, to be submissive, and to sit politely until patriarchy decides, you know what, I'm not going to hurt you anymore. And I'm done with that, because I'm not quiet and I'm not polite and I'm not going to sit quietly and wait. What I'm doing with this book is I'm saying that there are too many books out there that I call roadmaps to peace with patriarchy. I'm not interested in making peace with patriarchy, because patriarchy hurts me, it kills women, it kills girls, and is not interested in our full humanity. So I'm not interested in peace with patriarchy. I'm interested in destroying patriarchy, in dismantling patriarchy, and I consider this book my Molotov cocktail. It is a Molotov cocktail to be thrown into the heart of patriarchy. And I also want to explain, when I talk about patriarchy, patriarchy is not men.
Yes.
So I'm not saying go out there and throw this as a Molotov cocktail into the heart of men. This is not what I'm saying. And if men are scared, it's okay, let them be scared. I'm fine with men being scared.
No, for a change.
Right? We're scared every day because of the harm that they do to us.
Yeah.
But it's very important, because, you know, I'm a writer and words are important to me. So the definition of patriarchy is not men. Patriarchy is systems of oppressions and the institutions that are used to privilege male dominance. But it's the dominance of a particular kind of man. It's not every man who is privileged by patriarchy. And that's why I say patriarchy does not equal men, and men do not equal patriarchy.
And I think that's an important distinction to make. We'll get to that towards the end, because even the style of this book mentions a bit about how patriarchy also affects men negatively, but that's not what this book is about. So they could go sort that. I mean, if they need that sorted out on your own, you're speaking to women and girls who need these tools at this time and urgently now.
Precisely.
And I think there's a sense of urgency in this book. Like, you need to have this now. Why? Why now? Why is this urgent now?
I think we're living this incredible moment across the world right now where feminists such as myself, who for a long time have been saying patriarchy is dangerous, patriarchy is pernicious, patriarchy must be dismantled, we can point to places across the world, regardless of faith background, regardless of the political ideology that governs in that country, regardless of where on the geography of the world that you live, and say patriarchy is universal. So whether you're in China, where the Communist Party has just marked 70 years, whether you're in the United States, where we have the Republicans and the Democrats, whether you're here in Nigeria and all the different groups that form the Nigerian identity, whether you're in my country of birth, Egypt, that has been under military rule since 1952, whether you're in Saudi Arabia, which is an absolute hereditary monarchy, whether you're in Israel, which is an occupying force that destroys Palestinian lives and calls itself the Jewish state, or the UK, which is destroying itself with Brexit, regardless of where you live today, patriarchy governs. And people often forget it because they talk about the politics, which is basically the world of men, how men govern other men, and women and girls are incidental. But my contention and my insistence is that we recognize that patriarchy is the ruling ideology across the world, regardless of where you are. So I think in this particular moment, it's easier to point that out because you're seeing the rise of more and more authoritarian patriarchs. Now, I have an authoritarian patriarch in my country of birth, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who used to be he's the ex-army chief. He's now the president.
That's true.
Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel is an authoritarian patriarch. Boris Johnson in the UK is an authoritarian patriarch. And across Europe, we're seeing the rise of right-wing populist fascist governments represented by authoritarian patriarchal men. So as that very, very right-wing populist fascist kind of ideology is on the rise, what they all share in common is misogyny and patriarchy. So feminism must also rise across the world in concert to oppose this. So this is where the sense of urgency comes from. And a good friend of mine described my work in a way that I really love. He said, "You're theorizing from the front line." So this is exactly what I feel. This is where the sense of urgency is happening. I travel to different parts of the world and say, look here, look what is happening here in Nigeria, where women march to the market to talk about the sexual violence that women are subjected to. Look here in Saudi Arabia, where there are feminists in prison just because they're feminists, and they're the ones who pushed to lift the ban on driving against women. Look here in the United States, where in 2006, black feminist activist Tarana Burke launched Me Too, and then when some white actresses said Me Too, everyone thinks these white women launched Me Too, and this is why I launched #MosqueMeToo, to reclaim the space that Tarana Burke made for the not rich, the not white, and the not famous. So this is where my urgency comes from.
Wow. And you're touching on so many things that we're going to try our best to get into. We're not going to have enough time to get through this interview. This is a given, and it makes me sad, but we'll do what we can with it. We'll do what we can with the time. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
And we're back. If you're just joining us, we're on Literati today with Mona Eltahawy, the writer of The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. And there is a picture of a finger Because Mona, one of the things about your work is you're unapologetic about the stance you've taken. And I think it's so refreshing to finally find someone who is absolute conviction about what it is that you're talking about. That the time of being nice, being gentle, making it sound better so that those who don't necessarily care about the issue will feel better and not threatened about it. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now, 2011, Egypt, something changed. Something happened. Tell us what happened and what changed.
Well, what began in 2011 was the fruition of many, many years of activism. Because, of course, revolutions don't happen overnight. And also, revolutions are not done in one event. 18 days, we say, in Egypt, and then it's finished and we all go home and yay, the revolution succeeded. Because revolutions take many cycles in which to complete the work that took years to begin. So what happened in Egypt is something that so many of us had dreamt of for years. And it was basically people saying, we deserve to be free. People saying, we deserve dignity and honor. People saying, freedom, liberation, bread, social justice, human dignity. You know, things that we should take for granted, but which we had been denied for such a long time. First by British colonization and the monarchy that existed under colonization. And then even when the Brits were kicked out of Egypt and the monarchy was ended, we then became occupied by the military. Our own military began to internally occupy Egypt in a way that we've seen across our beloved continent, in which we place a colonization by white people, by colonization with our own people. So in Egypt, we have struggled for such a long time to say we deserve to be free. So what happened in 2011 was that millions of people went out into public squares and said, we deserve to be free. And it was electrifying. And it began something, I believe, continues to this day, because there is a great, Cesar Chavez, the great organizer in the United States, who organized farm workers and with Dolores Huerta in the 1980s, 70s and 80s. He said something that I think is beautiful for revolution. He said, when you talk about social change, you have to imagine it as if you're teaching people to read and write. When you teach someone to read and write, you'll never be able to unteach them to read and write. So even though the revolution in Egypt now is struggling, because it is, because we're still under military rule, we got rid of one man, Hosni Mubarak, who ruled us for more than 3 decades. But the revolution, the goal of the revolution was never to end Hosni Mubarak's rule, it was to end the regime. And that regime is still very much in power now, with its face as Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. So what happened in Egypt, though, is people saw millions of people rising up saying we deserve to be free, and that's like teaching them to read and write. They will never unsee that. And Egypt inspired the world.
There's a personal story, because this wasn't all rosy for you, being out in the street. What happened to you?
So I wasn't in Egypt for the 18 days. I couldn't make it back to Egypt during those particular 18 days. But like I said, the revolution continues. And I went back to Egypt several times after. And during one of those times, I went back for a very now iconic protest that happened over 5 days on a street called Mohammed Mahmoud, the name of which I now have tattooed on my skin, very close to Tahrir Square. And I joined this protest because it was a protest against the police and the military. Because they had invaded Tahrir Square and set fire to tents of the families of martyrs of the revolution. So we protested this violence. And during my participation in this protest, I was at the front lines with one of my friends. Egyptian riot police beat me and broke my left arm and my right hand, and they sexually assaulted me and they threatened me with gang rape, and I was detained for 6 hours by the Interior Ministry and another 6 hours by military intelligence, which at the time was headed by Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who was our current president, and I was blindfolded and interrogated with 2 broken arms. So I was one of at least 300 people who were injured in this protest, and at least 40 people were killed. And I share my experience of what happened there so openly and and very, very candidly, because I heard that there were at least 12 other Egyptian women who were sexually assaulted in an almost identical manner in the way that I was during this protest. And because I have the privilege of this platform, I'm speaking to you, and because I'm famous and my fame helped me and protected me, and it's the reason I'm alive, and because just a few weeks after, there was that now terrible and iconic picture of the Egyptian woman in Tahrir Square lying on her back. They had stripped open her abaya, you could see her blue bra, and 6 soldiers were stomping on her chest. To this day, Yusuf, we do not know this woman's name, because her family is ashamed that the world saw their daughter like this, rather than being proud that their daughter is this wonderful icon of the revolution. So yes, I was hurt in the revolution. So were many other people. But I'm alive and I'm free. And my platform protected me. So I'm now obliged to use this platform to say, we are still fighting for freedom in Egypt. And my Egyptian sisters especially are fighting to be able to speak this candidly about what the state, the street, and the home, what I call the trifecta of misogyny, is doing to us and our bodies, because we deserve to be free. And that's where this double revolution you want to talk to me about comes in.
Yes, and that is exactly where we're leading into. So tell me about this double revolution.
Well, the double revolution and the trifecta of misogyny essentially came about because when I wrote Why Do They Hate Us?, many of my comrades in Egypt, the men, were saying, but Mona, this is not the time to talk about feminism, because of course it's never the time, because half of society is expected to wait. Well, why should I wait, comrade? And they say, because, comrade Mona, nobody is free. Can't you see we're all oppressed? Nobody is free. And then I would say, well, comrade, it's true. The state oppresses men and women. That is true. But the state and the street and the home, the trifecta of misogyny, together oppress women. So I am here on the street risking my life with you, comrade. They broke my arms and they sexually assaulted me and they could have killed me. So now what are we going to do? Why should I wait? What happens now when the revolution goes home? You are my comrade in the street. Are you my comrade at home? You are my revolution in the fight against the state. Are you my comrade in the fight against sexual harassment on public transport, in the marketplace, at school and at university? I know that here in Nigeria there's been a big discussion about sex for grades,
Yes.
Are you my comrade when I'm fighting against sex for grades? So of course this is when the male comrades fall silent and they don't know what revolution means anymore suddenly.
And so it's necessary then to give the 7 tools, because this needs to move on, in spite of whatever it is that we men think about it. We'll talk about, there's a concept, one of the 7 necessary sins is don't run away from attention. Grab it. Don't make them believe that there's anything wrong with it. So we'll be right back to continue this discussion. And we're back. If you're just joining us, we're on Literati, brought to you by Glow, talking with Mona Eltahawy on the 7 necessary sins for women and girls. And so this issue of attention and bringing yourself, don't shy away from it. Don't let the patriarchy use this to exclude you again. And don't sit in a corner hoping they will give you a platform. It's not going to happen.
Absolutely. This is attention and ambition together.
Exactly.
Because we're constantly socialized as women and girls, again, to be quiet, to be modest, to be humble. And the quickest way to attack a woman is to tell her, oh, you're just seeking attention. And so the question then becomes, well, what is wrong with seeking attention? Because, you know, these men accusing any woman of seeking attention, they're not exactly shrinking violets themselves, you know? They're not, you know, staying at home and hiding. So what's wrong? And I think it really came home to me in 2012 when I was arrested in New York City for spray painting over a pro-Israel and racist ad in the New York subway. And immediately after I was arrested and the video of my arrest went viral and I wrote about it, people began to accuse me of seeking attention. And I was complaining to a journalist. Can you imagine? It was like, they're accusing me of doing it for attention. And she said to me, so what? Of course you're doing it for attention because you want attention to this terrible thing. And you want people to pay So it really helped shift my mindset, because now when someone accuses me, when I launched hashtag #MosMeToo, for example, immediately I was accused of seeking attention. So now this is what I say. I say, yes, I am seeking attention. And you know why? Because I deserve attention. My ideas are important and my ideas deserve to have attention. Because to use this against women and girls now is just, you can see what is happening. It's not just silencing, but it's shaming women and girls for wanting to be considered worthy of just existing, you know? And this idea that a woman cannot have ambition, the way that I talk about ambition in my book isn't even the kind of stereotypical ways that we talk about ambition, where a woman should want to be rich and to have a corner office and to be CEO. I'm not talking about white corporate America, and I'm not talking about capitalist ambition.
Yeah, because you talk about how classism is even a problem. So
absolutely, because I want my book to be accessible to working class women and girls, and so I want to know, what does ambition mean for a working class woman and girl? And I mentioned the story of a young woman of Latinx descent. Her family was originally, or her family history is Mexican. And she wanted to go to UCLA, you know, one of the top universities in California in the US. And her white teacher in high school said to her, aim lower. I don't think you can go there. And so she said, she wrote a letter to her teacher saying, why did you expect so little for me? You should be helping me think that I deserve more. So we have to start asking, how does race, does class, does gender, does ability, does faith background, do all these things work in concert to restrict women's lives? And this is what I call the octopus of patriarchy, because I want people to consider patriarchy as an octopus. Because when I talk about the privileging of male dominance, it's not just through misogyny. So the head of the octopus is misogyny, but the 8 tentacles of the octopus are capitalism, racism, classism, ableism, homophobia, the forms of oppression that patriarchy uses to strangle not just women and girls now, but also queer people, non-binary people, and men who do not fit the definition of what patriarchy wants for them. And that would be cisgendered, heterosexual, conservative, rich men.
Like I said, there's so much to dissect in this book, and there's so much work that you're doing. And so it's like, we have to come back to the book, but then the beauty of it is you're going to get a copy of this book. You have to go out and get a copy of this book and read it for yourself. It is for women and girls, but it's actually necessary. I would advise you from one guide to the other to also get it and read it. But then the #MosMeToo movement, you started that. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I started that in February of 2018 because I heard that a young Pakistani woman called Sabika Khan had posted on Facebook that she had been sexually assaulted on pilgrimage in Mecca, which is the holiest site for Muslims. I was sexually assaulted twice in 1982 when my family went on Hajj, the 5th pillar of Islam, the Muslim pilgrimage, also in Mecca. So I've spoken and written about that many times, and I wanted to show solidarity for Sabika. I also had heard that there's a Church Too movement in which Christian women talked about sexual assault and violence within a Christian sacred space. And I wanted to claim a space for Muslim women in the Me Too movement because, as I said, Tarana Burke launched it in 2006, but Me Too in 2017 had become this very rich, elite, white women thing. And as I say, Me Too is for the not rich, the not famous, and the not white. So I wanted to create a space for Muslim women. So I started hashtag #MosMeToo, and I urged fellow Muslim women who could share their experience to talk about their experience of sexual assault in Muslim sacred space. And the hashtag went viral. It's still being used today. So I think it's a really, really powerful way for women of Muslim descent to connect together and to say, you know what? We see how the racist right-wing Islamophobes try to use this against Muslim men. We're not interested in them. We see how the misogynists in our community try to silence us and to keep this under wrap and say, no, don't talk about these bad things. So we're not interested in them either. This is a space created by a Muslim woman for Muslim women.
And let's get this right. In the work that you do, of course, there's no way, because one of the I read this in some ridiculous piece about your work that had to do with how could someone who's advocating for sex with women be talking about complaining about sexual assault, and of course that's the kind of nonsense that's out there. But please tell us, because one of the 7 necessary sins is lust.
Yes. My favorite sin.
And I was going to say, you said that several times before. And so tell us about why that's a necessary sin for women and girls.
Well, at the heart of lust, and this is why lust comes as the seventh sin,
Yeah.
because all the other sins are leading to this,
Yeah.
is a really simple declaration that I believe is at the heart of every revolution. And that is the declaration, I own my body.
Yes.
Not the state, not the street, and not the home, not the church, the mosque, or the temple. I own my body. When I say I own my body, it means that it's my right to have sex with whomever I choose, obviously with their consent. With a woman, with a man, with many women, with many men, with whoever I choose when they consent to it. And I think when we say that, this example that you gave me, this nonsense example, look at the way that it discombobulates people.
Yeah.
Because they don't expect a woman to say that. They don't expect a woman to take ownership of her body. They don't expect a woman to say, I can have sex with a woman or a man. And at the same time, when I say I own my body, I'm saying consent and agency. That's why I keep saying with their consent.
Yes.
And that's what connects this nonsense they were talking about.
Yeah.
So yes, if I want to have sex with a woman, I will. And how that is connected to sexual assault is that this is about consent, and sexual assault does not wait for my consent.
Yeah.
So these fools who are saying that have to understand that at the heart of this revolution that I'm talking about, at the heart of lust, at the heart of saying I own my body, is consent and agency.
Yeah.
That is the revolution there. Sexual assault is the opposite of consent. Sex with a woman or sex with a man or sex with many people is all about consent. And that's why lust is the culmination of all of the sins.
I will not add anything or take away except to say thank you so much, Mona, for being with us in this time. Join us again on Literati. In the meantime, #NCLiterati. Follow us on News Central, and we'll keep talking. And follow Mona. There's a lot of interesting work she's doing. Wow. Get the book. Until next time, I'm Joseph Ike.